On the far end, we have Rosa from Accenture. We have Dennis from BizzTech. We have not Muki Polan, but Hugo Pinto from Filament AI. And we have Raquel Katigbak, thank you, from IBM joining us today. Really some very intelligent minds in the Web3 Metaverse space. So please do prepare some questions for when we open up the floor to Q&A. So we know that the Metaverse is coming, and some of you agree with me, and it will change our lives. And I'd just like to give an opportunity to my panelists here to kind of dig into exactly what they do within the organizations that you work with and how you share that vision of the Metaverse that you are grounded in. Dennis, would you like to start?
Yeah, I have a fancy title, Metaverse onboarder for enterprises, which means nothing else than I talk to enterprises that actually want to go into the Metaverse. And what I'm doing currently is within the company, I'm researching the industrial solutions for the Metaverse because those applications are going to be 2/3 what we expect of the total Metaverse. And those are also the easier solutions to explain, in my opinion.
Nick?
Sure. I am the Metaverse Strategy Lead for Europe at the Accenture Metaverse Continuum Business Group. And I am the person that helps companies and clients to define value-driven use cases to better implement Metaverse technologies in their enterprise and for consumers as well.
Raquel?
So I work within IBM. I'm targeting clients cross-industry in terms of iterating experiences in the virtual spaces and driving value models out of that, similar to what Nick is doing. I also lead patent circles within IBM around Metaverse because we do want to be really purpose-driven around how we deploy technology in this space. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is really around interoperability, identity, data privacy, consent, et cetera. So, happy to be here.
Yeah, I guess for me, after you get over my avatar, Mookie, I've been working in the space in the consulting industry, so figuring out what this technology means for businesses, when it's implemented, how does it impact the different dimensions, human dimension, technology dimension, business dimension, and then what are the potential opportunities for business to embrace it and then implement it. That's been my focus of it.
And in your experience and in the work that you do, what do you feel is the kind of majority of the response to the term metaverse right now? And how do you define it for your customers and your colleagues, the companies that you're onboarding? Nick?
Right, so let's start with the definition.
Yeah?
I'll do some self-promotion.
Please
so,
do, Nick.
First, all the different things that I do at Accenture, I recently also wrote a book that is called Understanding the Metaverse, a Business and Ethical Guide. It is available worldwide by Wiley and also by Amazon. I like to define the Metaverse as an infrastructure. It's the evolution of what we have right now, as they call it in the internet. And it's a moonshot. Is basically what we decided to achieve in 10 years from now of a highly interconnected network of 3D worlds that will allow us to work, connect, and entertain ourselves completely in a digital manner. Synchronously as well, so things will happen at the same time with millions of users at the same time. That will be driven by digital identity, digital currencies, digital items, and so on. But also it's going to be a portal for the digital content to enter into the real world. So it's no secret that many companies in the world, Meta, Apple, Samsung, and so on, are working on augmented reality glasses. The technology is not yet there, but it will be there in 10 years from now. So we are working right now in defining all those layers of this infrastructure. That is going to be digital identity, transaction, digital currencies. And so it's going to be a huge revolution of the kind of technology stack that we have right now operating on the internet. The interesting thing is that all those discoveries that are made right now by a lot of startups and big companies all around the world can provide value, immediate value, for a lot of clients. So the Metaverse is not just virtual world and Roblox and Fortnite, as a lot of people believe. The Metaverse is an ensemble of technology, and yes, AI is also part of those technologies, and there's a full chapter about AI in my book. So AI didn't kill the metaverse. AI is part of the metaverse, and thanks God is exploding right now because it's going to be very much needed for this infrastructure. So there will be a lot of discoveries that will completely revolutionize all the different kind of parts, moving parts in every kind of sector and enterprise. Now, when it comes to the companies and sectors that are most interested in the metaverse, I believe that it depends by the kind of use cases that you're talking about. Obviously, there are some companies operating into the industrial sector that are very much interested about digital twins. They're very much interested about the automation of processes, about synthetic data for machine learning training. All of those are use cases that are highly interesting for manufacturing. When it comes, for example, to financial sector, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about DeFi, but we're also talking about, for example, training for white collars using metaverse technologies, sales training, leadership training, compliance training, and so on. When it comes to consumer, obviously, there's all the part that is related to customer engagement, fidelity, tokenization of assets. All of those use cases are different industry by industry. So the metaverse is not just Fortnite and platform. The metaverse is something that touches all the different parts of the value chain, from the enterprise with, for example, onboarding or talent sourcing, to the marketing bits of any kind of product, to post-sales support for any kind of client. So it's a little bit of a broad answer, but basically this is what is the current landscape.
Yeah, and so Hugo, in terms of you've just recently started with Filament AI, but I understand that your previous role was more focused on immersive technologies, kind of the VR, AR side of things. Can you speak to how organic that transition has been, or what led you from immersive technology into AI? Because what I'm hearing from Nick is that AI is a component of the metaverse, bringing all of the kind of siloed enablers of user experience of immersive technologies through the enablement of blockchain and AI. Yeah, speak to how those are connected.
I think all of these technologies have developed in parallel, right? Each of them in their own very specific silo. And I think, well, probably the right medium for them to converge is the metaverse, right? So it's not here yet. But to come back earlier to your question, right? I think there's two very standard types of reactions. One is, I'm not quite sure, I think it's a fad, it will go away, don't do anything about it. And then there's my son's approach, he's 8. And when lockdown came, that was the socialization vehicle with his best friend. Was he got him in a closed room with an environment where he could interact with stuff remotely with his best friend. They were chatting away, they were laughing, and you're like, wow, amazing, right? But his reaction was, okay, I've done this for half an hour, I'm bored. What do I do next? So you give him the tutorial, and he does all of the tutorials. So he experiments things that I had experimented, like playing ping pong or doing a puzzle or playing a puzzle game. And he interacted with that via the metaverse, right? So two very different ways of approaching the same thing. And I think all of our biases and personal experiences lead us into these people that are afraid of the unknown and afraid of change. But actually those two things also define the approach that we take to the metaverse as a technology as well, right? And to bring back what Nick was saying, there's a huge infrastructural principle blueprint exercise that needs to be done for all of these technologies to converge in that ultimate outcome, right? My approach from experience is you can't do this with most businesses. You need to do the opposite, which is find a very thin use case, understand where the real benefit is that can be immediately experienced by the users of that, and prove it. And once you do that, you get a little bit more buy-in to do something a little bit bolder. But then all of the years that I've spent doing this have not worked into becoming something that is mainstream because the infrastructure and guiding principles are not there. So again, I think these two approaches will converge, and they are converging. And ultimately, as soon as we have a bigger set of devices out there, right, I think the natural transition of age groups that will react just like my 80-year-olds will quickly overtake the population that is still sort of a little bit sort of adverse to, yes, we need to adopt this.
Yeah, I think that's a key point here. And again, I said it on the earlier panel that I moderated, that these technologies are integrating into young people's lives more quickly than they are to many of us here in attendance at this conference. And I think that's something we all have to keep in the back of our minds, is that we're innovating and meeting the needs of in 5 to 10 years that will make a large impact into our lives, into our businesses, and how we interact with each other. And Raquel, how are you tackling that at IBM?
Well, I think certainly what we're looking at is really how do we build the ecosystem around not just the technology enablers for it, how do we build the cloud, how do we build metaverse-ready networks, how do we build edge solutions that will enable the industrial metaverse as well. We're also looking at it from the viewpoint of how do we help design things like BizzTech does, it's a metaverse as a service, metaverse as a platform. How do we help engage with our customers and clients in a way that they can also see the opportunities to drive new value models out of the metaverse? How do we create the partnerships within an ecosystem that only virtual experiences, immersive experiences can really support? So we're seeing definitely this mashup between telcos, financial services, automotive, all converging in one experience to the end user. And it's a B to B to C, a B to C to B. All of this stuff starts to really open up really fantastically. And I also think it's really around how we generate the acceleration of innovation, cross-industry innovation in this space. It's almost like we have this NASA moonshot, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity where we can leverage the hype, leverage the vision, leverage alignment across industry to really drive innovation in ways that can incrementally grow those thin vertical slices so that we have interoperability across industry, across participants, startups, established communities, et cetera. So from an IBM perspective, it's really around trying to build foundations of that, building proof points, to Hugo, to what you were saying, to really say to clients, this is what we're experimenting today. We're going to co-create this. We're going to co-build this. If it doesn't work, it's digital, it's virtual, scrap it and move on. It's a lot easier to remove code than it is to take a sledgehammer to a virtual showroom or a real showroom or a job site, right?
So improving efficiency and effectiveness and the iteration process. And Dennis, from the onboarding perspective, what kind of problems are you solving for your customers?
So usually customers, when they come to us, they have no idea what the metaverse is. So basically, like a lot of people in the room, hey, what is this? So what we do is the onboarding process is I iterate with them what can be done, what's done in the industry, what are the best use cases, and then we usually partner up with industry partners like marketing agencies that actually know the industry very well, because every industry is different. Marketing is one of the parts. I call it ICE. Like you have industrial metaverse, you have customer metaverse, you have enterprise metaverse, and we usually start with the enterprise part because training, communication, that is very low-hanging fruit for a lot of companies to enter the metaverse, to actually form a key group. We heard it before, like form a key group, form the right group to push this technology. Then you have this group that will actually spread this technology within the company before the company is actually ready to implement that service for the customers. Because you cannot just jump over that step. If your crew isn't ready to work in the metaverse, that's terrible for you. And then I think the next step is to combine all these things. We heard about ESG, we heard about industrial solutions. What if I can combine that? So if I can have a quality manager not travel as much, then it goes into ESG. But it also goes down, like the bottom line is he doesn't travel a lot, he doesn't spend a lot of money. If I can now attract more talent, because that has been one of the topics as well, talent retention, because talent is limited, as we know, and we want these people to be as productive as they can be. So if I have one person that is sitting in the central of your industrialized or a service department that doesn't have to travel, I don't have to discount this travel time. That is like basically a 100% productive, also doesn't have the problem telling their significant other, hey, sorry, I'm on the road half of the year. So these things factor in, and you have better retention, you have better ESG, you have like all over the place, you have basically savings that are immediate. And these are the things that are very important to companies. Like, how do they save money? Like with marketing, it's always hard to explain where to save money, but with industrial and mix of marketing and retention and actually attracting talent, because everyone under 25, we internally, we don't even consider gamers. We think everyone in that age group is a gamer by definition. So these people, they're young, they're very used to moving in these 3D worlds, communicating with others in these 3D worlds, and they just wait for this metaverse to happen because they have been basically moving in it for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point to consider that digital experience of life has been a part of, Gen Z and Alpha, and will continue to have to be a part of their lives. And there is the expectation that there will be a digital component to every aspect of their lives, from their careers to their relationships to how they do their banking. Every aspect of their lives will have that digital component, and what the metaverse offers is the convergence of all of the components of it to come together to make it more seamless. And the user interface is the virtual reality or augmented reality. So it's a system which we will all be integrating into our lives, just as we did with the internet when in early days we all could never imagine putting our Visa, our credit card details on the internet online. And we're at that point again where all that hesitation and those fears that are coming up when we hear about the change that is coming are coming up again. But it will ultimately become more seamless and frictionless, so that it will quietly enter our lives. And from a work perspective, what skills will be in demand, do you think, for companies, organizations to be able to implement a metaverse strategy? Who do they need to hire to make this happen if the skills are not already in existence in their companies? What are your thoughts about that, Raquel?
I think certainly needs to be really user-driven, first of all. So anything to do with design and user-centric mindset is super important, because you can't just try to rebuild the metaverse in the same way that we built Web 2.0. I mean, that would just be ridiculous and completely dystopian. So I do think we have an opportunity to reset and really reflect on what it means and what it is that we're trying to build. And I think it's a mindset around being purpose-driven. I keep saying that because I'm a big proponent. I'm super passionate about that. So I do think it's around user-centric design. I think there's a lot of opportunities for assets right now, right? How to build those 3D assets. And maybe there's, obviously, I think another topic later today is kind of talking about generative AI, and you mentioned that as well. But how do we start to leverage some of these generative AI tools, prompt engineers, right? Everyone wants to be a prompt engineer these days. Even security, I think, is another big one. And I think also ethics design. I mean, you wrote the book literally on it, right? So how do we infuse AI ethics, metaverse ethics into these experiences? I think those are the kinds of skill sets, in my view, that are currently missing, that we should really be developing more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of questions about ethics, regulation, governance of a metaverse that is global, where we're connecting without geographical boundaries, and what that does. And part of that conversation brings up decentralization, and how that empowers the metaverse. And I wonder, what your thoughts around shaping the future of how we actually interact with dignity and respect towards each other.
It's a million-dollar question. The problem is that we have a very bad track record as humanity in using emerging technology in an ethical way, or without thinking about unforeseen consequences. And this goes back to, probably the gunpowder invention or fossil fuel utilization. Nowadays we can see it with social networks, polarization of political views and stuff like this. Obviously, we need to raise awareness about these problems, and that's why I wrote a book. It's called Understanding the Metaverse, a Business and Ethical Guide. I had the luck of speaking with a lot of people from governments around the world about this topic. It is important, but funny enough, the most interesting thing about this topic is the awareness that has been on the rise thanks to the generative AI topic. So a lot of people believe that the metaverse is different from generative AI. The generative AI is a subset of a technology that will be deeply embedded in the metaverse, and I'll tell you why. The future of interfaces for metaverse experience creation, but also avatar, virtual human collaboration, is going to be generative AI. ChatGPT-powered avatars by analytics that are deeply embedded into the metaverse infrastructure, anything that is related to 3D asset creation in a programmatic way. A little bit like the holodeck from Star Trek. You enter in a room that is virtual, okay, create a 1950 club in New York City or Chicago, and then you can hear the piano playing, you can see the smoke and stuff like this. People are not going to use Unity to create 3D asset anymore in the future. So there are some ethical aspects that need to be considered at this point. How do we know that the person that we are talking to in a virtual world is real or not real? How do we know that the biometric data that are used for tracking of my eyes and my hands and my body are not used also to track my emotional response to specific kind of stimuli? Like, for example, I see a red virtual car, then my heart skips a beat because I love red cars on a Ferrari if I'm an Italian, of course. And then obviously the next person that arrives in the metaverse room is somebody that wants to sell me the next Ferrari model or the next house or the next political view, because they know me inside out. They know exactly what makes me tick. And basically this makes them the perfect salesperson. But there's another problem, which is, and then from this I can talk about McLuhan. Medium is the message. Mobile phones are communication devices that deeply change the way that we communicate. Okay. The metaverse and all the devices that will be connected to the metaverse will be a reality device. And they will change the perception of how we consider what is real and what is not real. The division will blur. So if I walk into a room and I'm a bit thirsty and maybe I'm a bit dehydrated and my Apple Watch can detect that, or my Oura Ring can detect that, and there's 3 cans of very icy, beautiful looking Coca-Cola there, how do I know that that is not product placement? So these are all questions that government needs to start talking about right now, because when it's going to start to happen, it's going to be already too late.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating for us to think about, isn't it? The data that's available to the technology systems that we will be creating into our lives. And I think that's a really key point, is to think about our biometric data as a part of this new frontier of information about us that we do have to protect and question, who owns that data and how do we keep it secure and safe so that the metaverse doesn't become this kind of dystopian, manipulative, all-consuming future that we're all a little bit afraid of. And in your experience, Dennis, how are people feeling about that? What is the kind of resonance in the context of how you're shaping onboarding and the integration of businesses into that? What are they thinking about the ethics behind the future of their business in the metaverse?
Usually one of the first questions is like, hey, how can we get the data and what data can we get? And by default, is to say that by default we don't collect data. But everything that is GDPR compliant, of course, it's a customer's platform, right? So if they want to know what happens on the platform, they can track it. And we think we can see what happens in the game space. If you play a video game online, they can see how long you've been looking at advertisements. What a lot of people don't know is games actually make the majority of their money with advertisements, because you can actually track the eyes. I can actually see how long you've been looking at any kind of advertisement. With a billboard, you cannot say that, because everyone's just driving past. So this kind of technology, we think, is very similar. So we don't see a problem right now. But what's going to be in the future, blockchain, we talked about blockchain solutions. What if I can only connect with the metaverse if I have a blockchain token, one of those NFTs? We don't want to go into that. But basically, if I log in, I can see whatever you've been doing with that wallet, and who you've been interacting with, what projects you own, don't own, have owned, sold. And AI can just in a split second calculate what kind of customer you are. Do you have the right to collect that data or not? That's going to be interesting in the future, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. So this speaks to kind of blockchain, which is brings the possibilities of decentralization. What do you think about that, Hugo, in the future of Filament AI and how, or does it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of those areas converge together. I mean, all of these examples are quite interesting.
Yeah.
I can point to a project that I was involved in like a long time ago, 7 years ago, which was redesigning, and this is not more blockchain, but then applicable to Metaverse, obviously, which was redesigning the economics of a utility service, right? Does a utility, like if you produce energy from sustainable sources, does it cost anything to produce apart from the hardware you need and the network that you need to implement? And obviously there's maintenance, etc. But in a not so distant future, that could become a zero cost, even though that's not today's reality for sure, given what's happened recently. What would it look like? How would companies make money, right? If they're not making money out of, kilowatts or electrons in the case of oil and gas. And it all comes down to data, right? Information. Now, the key thing about information and data, and I think GDPR has been really like a blunt instrument, but really good at stopping the hemorrhaging of everyone getting hold of your data and doing whatever they want without any type of accountability. And basically removing your power as the generator and owner of that data. I think one thing that came in very clearly after that exercise is the power of data, but also the power of empowering people to make a decision about their data, right? Because imagine you own a commerce establishment, right? And you want to have insurance, but you don't really want to install those boxes and pay a contract to an insurance company, right? Can you use data about digital access to a store, about electrical consumption, and a few other sort of profile pieces of information like types of business, opening times, number of employees, etc., and actually create an insurance product off the back that if it's outside of opening times and there is a fluctuation in energy consumption that indicates that it's an actual switch that has been switched on and there are more than X amount of people in that store at 4 a.m, there's a 99% probability that someone is actually there burglaring the place, right? So all of these different logical steps to calculate, is there someone in the building? Has the consumption of energy fluctuated? Is it a fire? And you should call the fire department. All of these are applications of different algorithms that typically you will use machine learning to both design them and then train them and execute them in a business context. This is still picking up on data points that we've been producing for over 30 years, but knitting all of this together to be able to manifest the value of that data point in an insurance business, in even, councils for planning purposes around how do they manage the public infrastructure, security forces to actually know where do they patrol, how do they patrol. And all of these have a controversial side of, do you go too much to the right-hand side of minority reports type? We catch you before you commit the crime, and then did you commit the crime, right? But there is a lot of value in focusing on some of this low-hanging fruit, because if then you look at things like insurance products, they're terribly outdated, right? The insurance business was designed as it still exists today. Not exactly, but sort of, as it was designed to, protect ships in the 15th century, so 16th century. So it was for you not to lose the money of the cargo, but, things have changed. A trip doesn't take a year to go around the world like it did back then. The goods are mutable. The ownership of the goods can exchange while they're still in transport. All of these different things are things that if you bring technologies like blockchain, logic and reasoning and processing power like AI, and then the big missing component, which is people that are prepared to deal and accept this change and keep changing the processes to be able to surface that value. I think this is the thing that is still missing, right? Is that connector. And we were talking just before we came up, which is accepting that there is a translator role of what people do today and what people can do tomorrow powered by this technology, right? And then there was the problem also generated by the technology itself, which is every AI story is a Terminator. So suddenly all we see is Arnold Schwarzenegger walking into the room trying to eliminate us. And that is not the reality, right? Even if that were to happen, we're still very far away from that. But I don't think that is the reality. So I think there's a lot of potential for good. I think we definitely need to focus, and governments definitely have a role in that, right? probably needs to be a more iterative one, but I'll leave that discussion for the next panel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a complex system, isn't it? We're talking AR, VR, we're talking AI, machine learning, we're blockchain, Internet of Things, the connection of devices, exchanging data in the metaverse. We've got the reconstruction of the physical world into the virtual, so digital twins. We've got the 5G connectivity that needs to enable this, or 6G, 7G, whatever it may be in the future. And then, somewhere we really don't want to go is those brain-computer interfaces that makes the hardware lighter and more easy to wear and accessible. And these are what all comes together in the future and the vision of this moonshot metaverse.
Yeah.
I think it is a very complex system, and I think on the macro, micro, and individual level, we have a huge responsibility. Those of us on this panel who are contributing and shaping, we're writing books, holders of information that, like panels today, we share this information so that people are able to go away and think about how consciously and how best to implement these technologies into their organizations, into their businesses, into their lives, into their communities. And I think it is something we all have to become aware of, and to design that responsible, secure metaverse that we think will enable and empower us in the future.
Inclusive as well.
And inclusive, yes, yeah. Yeah, and there are a lot of problems to solve as we get there, and technology can support us to do that, but as you're quite right, Hugo, it will take people to create and really fulfill the potential of the metaverse, right?
Sure.
That's a huge responsibility. And we have a few moments left, and I wonder if we have any questions from the floor, if the audience had anything they wanted to contribute to at this moment in time. We do have a microphone going around. Okay, in the front there. Oh, look. I can walk right by. I have no control.
Just want to put, first of all, that was an incredible panel, and one of the best articulations of the problems and the opportunity that I've heard in a long time. Second point, I attended a conference last week in San Diego, Sachin Mitra, who Raquel will probably know as the guy who built IBM Watson, and he was talking about built for purpose, which I think is something we need to take on board, because if it's built for purpose, it has value. Can I just give you some context? Dennis was talking about eye tracking. I work with Professor Simon Barron out of Cambridge University, one of the leaders in autism. He will tell you that eye tracking for autistic children is key. And if you can follow the eye tracking, you can help manage an autistic child. You can't cure that child, help manage it. It gets very interesting when it gets to the metaverse. And just incidentally, for anyone who doesn't know this, we are all autistic. So there are issues around mental health and well-being that are probably better solved within the metaverse than can be in the society we live in today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of the education metaverse, there is a lot of useful applications we can have for that biometric data, including eye tracking, which allows us to understand more deeply the neurodiverse needs of individuals, and we can begin to truly create personalized learning for based on their responses in biometric data. And we have that when we talk about a metaverse with purpose. That is the kind of metaverse that I think we all want to be a part of and creating in the future.
I think it's also about accessibility, because you and I were talking about this earlier. To your point, it's around how do we leverage this technology to minimize the digital divide that we know is increasing today?
Yeah.
How do we enable underrepresented segments or people who have not necessarily been able to access, for example, blind people? How would they experience the metaverse? How would they be able to work through that? So how do we start to leverage some of these technologies and start to build more of that participation across different segments that they may not have?
I just wanted to pick up on this because obviously the eye tracking example is probably directed to what I was saying about the data that are collected during my speech before. The tone of how I explain the metaverse, especially in my book, is extremely positive. I believe that it's an incredible opportunity. As any emerging technologies, we have an opportunity for change. One of the programs that I'm supporting in Accenture through our corporate citizenship program with funding from Accenture and outside Accenture, because I'm part of the scientific panel, is a program organized by the Virtual World Society that is a nonprofit organization that is led by Professor Tom Furness, that, as you may know, is considered globally the godfather of VR. This program is a pilot that is providing to 400 unprivileged families access to metaverse technologies to upskill them and to provide a better quality of life. And we ran this program, we got some amazing data about the effectiveness of these tools for upskilling, training, even for mood and for proper wellness, mental wellness of people. And the research is going to be published very, very soon. So I'm a huge believer that this can transform the world. This can make the world a better place and also can raise the bar for everybody. But we have to do it responsibly. And that's why I wrote this book.
Just behind Cyrus there.
Thanks, Nina, and the wonderful panel for this very useful and value-added session. Obviously, Metaverse and Web3, there's a big and there. It's quite a big subject. I work in Metaverse myself, and I co-founded a Metaverse platform company, and I deliver Metaverse education both for K-12 and corporate level. In fact, one of my companies called Immersive work very well with Accenture. My question is that it's easier to actually, these days, people and organizations accept the virtual reality or extended reality part of Metaverse much easier, but when you come to the kind of like virtual currency, the digital identity, the kind of like more towards the decentralization part of Metaverse, people start to question, to actually ask the all kind of uncertainties. So the question is that in your experience, how do you actually cautiously and sensibly guide organizations through that transition? Because obviously it is uncharted water. There are still a lot of unknowns and risk in the kind of like a digital economy part of the Metaverse. Thank you.
I would just want to say one small thing, and that is for the others. Metaverse doesn't equal Web3, and Metaverse doesn't equal decentralization. There are companies that will not be able to use blockchain technology for a very long time for many different reasons. So the decentralized Metaverse and the centralized Metaverse will coexist for a very, very long time. That's
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll pick up on one of the points. Because I think we tend to think the metaverses or some of these technologies cause and impose things on people. And I think we need to think about it the exact opposite way. They just enable things you expect to be available, to be true, right? Because let's face it, I would expect that if I have a banking card with a chip on it, I would expect that to work everywhere. That's the expectation as a consumer and as a user. As I would expect that if I have a digitized passport, I am able to go in every country in the world. So it's not the technology that is disrupting how things should work. It's technologies need to enable how governments, organizations, and ultimately people have actually access to what should be their right to do, what should be available for everyone, right? So I think we need to change the mindset of the challenge is not to prevent the impact of technology, back to the purpose point, it is to actually enable everyone to have access to the same type of capabilities, which, let's be honest, with the state of technology and technological evolution we've experienced over the past 20 years, should be standard, right? Especially after COVID, right? COVID was such a great opportunity to reset. And again, you raised the point, right? It's the opportunity to reset. I know we won't, we'll fail at that as well, right? And ultimately, it will be Microsoft selling a license for Metaverse Office, something like that, in the end. That is still good, right? Because that is still driving that standardization and that commoditization that ultimately will make it accessible to most people, right? The big challenge for regulators and businesses, and again, I think this is an opportunity for them to work together, is to actually define what are the standards that are going to make this commercially viable. Because unfortunately, the industry works on P&Ls, right? And P&Ls work on quarterly results. So unless we find a formula to be able to still have a balance of that business performance and that impact versus the social and enablement impact of those technologies, I think we're going to go through another one of those cycles where, you're going to do this for a long time and then after 20 years, maybe not 20 years because cycles now have become much quicker, they will stabilize.
unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I think
Person's question.
I'm so sorry, yes.
All right, one more question, and then we'll have to move on. Thank you.
Thanks for a fascinating discussion, and it's great to see Accenture, my ex-company, moving in this direction. My question is, what about the excluded? What about people that are scared of the metaverse? Do we need to worry about them, or can we move on without them?
Well, I think that, at this time in 2023, we are called to be architects of the future, not its victims, right? We all have an obligation to support those around us on this journey, communicate, create equitable spaces, consider who's at the table building technology platforms, and really, in an ecosystem where we are driven by our P&Ls, really consider a more social and more broad impact that the technology is going to have. And I think that ecosystem is being built, and I think there are many more people like our esteemed panelists here who are contributing to a better metaverse, a metaverse that we believe in and is purposeful. And the more people on that journey, the better. So I invite you all to try out the technology, to do your own research. You have to have your hands in it. You have to understand how it works in its very nascent stage that it is right now. It's not perfect. It's got a lot of friction. You put a headset on today, it's uncomfortable. There's a learning curve, and we all have to go through the pain of this learning curve to be able to contribute to the future of a better metaverse for all of us. And on that note, we do have to wrap up, but thank you very much. Really great questions, and thank you to my panelists.